Well, there's bees buzzing, and there's flies buzzing, and there's all sorts of little insects buzzing all around me. And last week I had trouble in Tralee because there was traffic on the street, and I thought it's interfering with the podcast. And now I'm at home in the perfection of my own little studio shed in the hills above Loch Allen, and what do I have? I have bees. I won't say the F word yet, but you know what I'm saying? I'm annoyed with the bloody bees. I remember 3 years ago, one of my first podcasts, there was a bee just like this, began to buzz all around me, and I ended up doing the whole podcast, giving off about the bee. It's funny the way they can annoy you. But I stopped doing the podcast in Tralee after about 20 minutes last week, and apologies for not having a full 50 or 60 minutes as usual, but I just thought it was interfering. And afterwards there were people who put messages on the site saying, well, it sounded perfectly clear to us. And I thought, well, it was me. It sounded worse when I was recording it, the interference. And hopefully the little bee behind me is actually interfering with me more than he is with you. How do we get rid of the interference of bees? Is we pay attention to them and we embrace them. Everything that annoys me, I wake up sometimes at, like this morning I woke up at 6 o'clock and I was annoyed at certain issues. I was kind of troubled in myself. And it's a common thing that can happen to anybody where you get, anxieties, they surface overnight and then they wake you at about like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And you're just waking with the one single focus of whatever is annoying you. Might be a person, might be like, an odd exchange you had with the butcher the previous day, and it might be that there are issues with you and the butcher, or might be you're projecting something onto the butcher, who knows. But it's like the things that wake you early in the morning sometimes can be the very perfect, focused way that your unconscious works and shows you, throws up some issue and says, deal with this, sort it out. And that happened to me this morning. I started thinking about somebody, worrying about somebody, thinking, are they all right? Am I annoying them? Are they annoying me? All that sort of stuff. And it's going on in your head. And I always find that the way to reach equilibrium and peace when you have moments like that is to feel that in some sense I am in the world not as an enemy to the world. That's the way I deal with it. I begin to kind of reflect on the fact that me in the world is actually part of the world. The whole cosmic evolution, which has a determinism to it that's beautiful and revelatory. It just constantly, endlessly feels like newness, like revelation is happening in every moment. And that's a beautiful thing about the universe, and you see it in nature, and you see it in other human beings and other sentient beings. But a very important part of that for me is reminding myself that I'm also part of that. I am the revelation. If you're to put it in terms of faith in a God, it's not like thinking about yourself as different from God and, you being the wrong one out or the odd one out. It's actually thinking of the fact that you are God, that you are God's revelation to the world. And that there is a harmony between you and the environment around you, which is just completely beautiful. Now, if that be the case, then the other person that I'm worrying about, that I may have some issue with, or I might be dysfunctional about them, or I might be having a row with them because of something they said yesterday, it's still that they are part of this revelatory universe, and so are you. There's no one who is different from you. It's almost like we are all the one thing revealing itself. So everything will sort itself out. Everything. There's no need to intervene in the universe in some sense. There is only the possibility to respond beautifully to the universe. And I think that that's the core of all my writing. There was a fellow who wrote to me recently, and he quoted me. He remembered something I said to him in a workshop a decade or 2 decades ago. And he said that put him on the right road as a writer. And he's gone on to have a distinguished career, and he's very well known. But he said, he quoted me, I was saying to him that when you write a memoir, it's not an act of revenge, it's an act of forgiveness. And sometimes that act of forgiveness is forgiving yourself as well. So when you remember, when you look back, when you cherish memories, you're cherishing them never as an act of revenge, because revenge makes the other person your enemy. But forgiveness allows you to embrace the other person, or to experience yourself as being embraced. That's the lovely thing, that you are, that I am, that we are embraced by the universe, that we are part of the universe, we belong in the universe. I am here, I don't have to justify that I'm here. You know, I don't have to behave in certain ways to prove it's okay for me to be here. Not only is it okay for me to be here, but I am, in my whole being, in this moment, talking to you, I am the revelation of God. If you want to think about it in terms of a mentor deity, and if you want to think about it in terms of more Buddhist idea, it would be that there is no differentiation between you and me, between me and the person that I'm thinking about at 5 o'clock in the morning when I wake up and I'm feeling uneasy, I have a little anxiety, you know, am I getting on well with that person? Did I have an argument with that person yesterday? They are not the enemy. They are not different from me. They are simply the revelation of God, as I am the revelation of God. There is only one thing. There is only one unity. There is only one being. One complete cosmic Buddha awakening. Awakening mind in love and compassion. And that idea of oneness, of course, is the mother of all compassion, because it gets rid of the delusion of differentiation, the delusion that there is me and I'm an individual and you're an individual and we are different and I have rights and I demand my rights and you need to give me my rights. That sense of Western human rights, which has been very, very good in the past 100 years for, you know, protecting groups and individuals from oppression and injustice, it also has a flaw that it can allow you to live in a space where you feel so autonomous in yourself that you're alienated from other people and alienated from the sense of a greater communal sense of being. So we get anomie, we get isolation, we get alienation in the West, and we get a lot of dysfunction. And sometimes, you know, there's a number of companies I'm aware of, like just, you know, industries, like businesses, and the employees in them are always happy. And the employees would tell you that the reason they're happy is they like working for this particular company. They feel they belong in the company. It's just amazing how much happiness comes from the sense of belonging. You get a sense of belonging in a group, in a community, in a football team, in a club. It just is, it's the basis of so much happiness. And I think underneath that is that deep, profound Buddhist idea that there is one single thing, there's one single consciousness, and that, you know, you look at another person, it's like they are a limb of your being. They're not separated from you. that person is like part of the one thing that you are. Like two different waves are part of the ocean. And it is the ocean that comes through us and expresses itself in the form that we now take. The Bodhisattva vow in Tibetan Buddhism is about, taking refuge in the Buddha, not for oneself, not for one's own benefit, but always for the benefit of other people. So if you like, the Hinayana, which is the vehicle of the middle way or the lower path, and that shouldn't sound pejorative in Buddhism, but the kind of basic step in Buddhism is to take refuge in the Dharma, to practice Buddhism because karmically it will free you from the endless cycle of negative karma and allow you to avoid destruction and damnation. Good consequences come from good actions. Bad consequences come from bad actions, and your consequences, the consequences of your actions follow you like a shadow, and you die. The only thing that's certain is that you die, and the only thing that's certain is that your karmic actions will have consequences. So that in Buddhism they would say, well, bad negative actions will lead to, an unfortunate rebirth. Whereas what you're really striving for is to free yourself completely from all negative actions so that you can liberate your whole being. You can awaken as the Buddha. Again, to Western ears, this might sound a bit like sort of mythical, magical nonsense. And it is if you're trying to absorb it literally, if you're trying to absorb Buddhist ideas as like reincarnation, if you're trying to think about them at a kind of a literal or a material level, they're nonsense. But they're actually written out of the great metaphysical depth of philosophical tradition. They are metaphysical ideas. They're not just physical ideas, they're not just literal ideas. When you talk about reincarnation, you're trying to talk about reincarnation as a truth that in its mythic narrative reflects the deepest layer of what it is to be alive. So in that sense, let's go with reincarnation for a moment and say that negative actions have consequences and will lead to an unfortunate rebirth, whereas positive actions will lead to a positive rebirth. Eventually, ultimately, letting go of all clinging, all self-clinging, all sense of self, awakening into the unity of Buddha mind, Buddha consciousness, love and compassion. So that brings in the sense that the otherness of another person is in itself a delusion. It's actually ignorant. It's wrong as an idea, because that other person, that sentient being that manifests before you, whether it be a sentient being like in the garden, like a bird or an animal, or whether it be a human, that sentient being that's there before you is a manifestation of Buddha, as you are. You're both manifestations of the one thing. So that's something that makes it like you and the other person are one. And if I'm thinking like, I'm uneasy because I'm not getting on with somebody, I'm uneasy because I don't like somebody, or because they did something to offend me, or maybe I'm feeling guilty because I think I did something to offend them, who knows? So they're like, not just different from me, they're like my enemy at the moment. Well, a Buddhist practice is to just consider that they're not your enemy, they're actually like a limb of your own being. And one of the most profound ways that they use in Tibetan Buddhism to illustrate this, and again it's a narrative that can only live as a metaphysical narrative. If you take it literally, you'll miss the point. But just come with me for a moment into the idea that I give you a narrative, and it reflects a metaphysical truth, the same way as a poem reflects a profound truth which is not necessarily rational. If you said that, he sings like a blackbird, you don't really mean literally he sings like a blackbird. You mean that in some metaphysical way, in some deep poetic level of being, he truly sings like a magpie. Or like a blackbird. maybe like a magpie. I sing like a magpie. But you know what I'm getting at? I'm getting at that sense of the poetry of human language. I'm getting at the sense that there is a metaphysical dimension that language reaches out into. And that's what religious narratives are all about. They are true. They are true, but they are at the cutting edge of where language, poetic language, meets rational reality. So let me go to the Tibetan one. It's called the Mother Being. And it says like, everybody is your mother being. It's based on a kind of a logic that if time is beginningless, if there is no end to time going backwards, if it's just a constant, then at some stage, simply as a mathematical permutation, every other sentient being was at one stage your mother. That is, if karma is to be accepted as sort of a universal law, that we are here in beginningless time, and that we manifest as the wave, as what we are today, as a human being, because this is the present manifestation based on earlier karma, and that this lifetime allows us to create karma that will be resulting in another lifetime. The only thing very special about human lifetime is that human realm is the only realm in which awareness of suffering can lead to the motivation to be free from suffering. We're the only realm in which awareness of suffering, we can be aware that we are suffering. And that can lead us to the motivation to be free from suffering. And then where does that lead you? That leads you, obviously, in Buddha's terms, to the idea of taking refuge in the Buddha. But what I'm saying is that this sense of endless or beginningless time, the sense that everybody is simply a wave recurring and recurring, and we are here now in this present moment, like this, embodied as humans. It means if you go through the permutations of that, then at some stage everybody was your mother. Because it's infinite. So every possibility is contained within the infinite, and therefore every being was your mother. And every being who is now your enemy was once your friend, and every being who is now your friend was once your enemy. It's like instead of having a fixed notion that these are my friends and those are my enemies. Tibetan Buddhism invites you to think about all beings as having been in some way different in another lifetime. That maybe this enemy was your friend, maybe this friend was your enemy, and also perhaps this friend could become your enemy if you behave in certain ways, or this enemy could become your friend if you behave in certain ways. They're all interchangeable. And every single being was in some lifetime, because lifetimes are beginningless. There's no beginning. It's an infinite kind of time we have been here already. And so it must be that this particular person was once your mother. And then you think of how you would treat your mother, and how a mother is so selfless, so caring to her child. And you think that's the level of love that this person at some manifestation in the past had for me. And the residue of it is still there. And that's extraordinary. Every being was my mother. So, it's not that idea would get you locked into the notional or conceptual idea about every being being your mother. It's the opposite. In other words, if you think about every being as being your mother, then it begins to dissolve the sense of differentiation. It dissolves the sense of otherness. You begin to sense that in the present moment there is one single thing, and that is Buddha, awakening. And you are a limb of this presence. You are a wave of this ocean. And the person next to you, or the person that you're disagreeing with, or the person that you're having an argument with, they are also a limb of that being. They are also a wave of that ocean, the same ocean that is within you. So you wake at 5 a.m, you have a certain little anxiety and worry about the world. And then you realize, this other person could be like my mother. This other person has within them at some stage, in the infiniteness of their being, they have the capacity to be a selfless mother to me, even though they're your enemy. And that begins to dissolve the sense of otherness, differentiation. It begins to soften the alienation, the anomie, and it begins to allow you to breathe in the present moment, feeling that your presence, your breathing, is simply a wave that moves with the other wave, and that deep, deep down, you are one. Now, that's what to do at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m, and that's just a little extra meditation on Tibetan Buddhism, because I was short last week. I was only 20 minutes, and so there's another little reflection. Thank you for being here.